Hello and welcome to another concept. I just finished watching one of Impulse SV's Hermitcraft 7 videos where he has an entire wall of the kelp farm and an entire wall of the melon farm, and he's planning on doing an entire wall of the pumpkin farm, but he didn't have it installed at the time. He is going to have so many resources that they're just going to be piling up or getting shunted off into a cactus at the end. And so I had a thought on a way that he could make use of all of his overflow if after it goes through the sorting system, anything else that cannot be picked up goes to one further module where it makes bone meal for him. And once the bone meal's filled up and all of these hoppers are filled up and can no longer take anything, then shunt things into a cactus. I have this disabled for easier vision, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 1 hour. I have nowhere near as much being produced as he does, but I'm going to give a 1 hour time lapse and see just how strong this concept is. It is currently 4 layers of 26 slices of kelp, and it is 6 layers with 4 pumpkins and 6 layers with 4 melons. So in the end, this is significantly less than he's producing, and he'll be able to get a much higher. I'm not going to use the term exponential because almost everyone that I hear using that uses it incorrectly. He's going to get a ton more bone meal than I will, but let's take a look and see how this does. Right, I'm going to make sure that I take everything out of here first. Okay, so timer, got it. Okay, time's up. We have a stack in 17. It's not bad. Just an hour that you could be running around doing other things in your base and a stack of bone meal off of that. And this, like I said, is significantly smaller than his. Uh, for having, you know, just passive bone meal generation, not bad. And if you tied it in so that you had these going into your storage system, and then when they were no longer being picked up by the storage system, they overflowed into a bone meal production. This is the only place where I have the hoppers, and typically, because of the size of my farm, I don't need to worry about my hoppers filling up. I just don't produce enough. But at the speed at which Impulses goes through, he would probably start filling up the first, if not the first two, just with kelp alone. But you could out the back, you could tie in the filtering. And so you may have to go down a second hopper to do this, but you could do filtering so like this one only takes kelp through, say, here, and then these two take pumpkins and these two take melons, or three take melons and one takes pumpkins because the melons break into multiple, whereas the pumpkins break into one. So you could very easily fill your storage system automatically, and then once it's full, you could shunt the excess into a bone meal production, and then once you can no longer hold any of the items through the last hopper, you can send it off into a cactus at the end and destroy anything left over so you don't have items just sitting around. Some of the melons land on the dirt because they shoot sideways instead of forward. There's not really much I can do about that except that hope one of them is going to grow and push the melons forward. Now, the way that I have this designed, and the reason why it works with kelp, is because it's two layers of water. There's the layer here in the front that's on top of that stone brick, and then there's the actual source blocks where the kelp base is. Then there's a source block along each of the pistons, and hidden at the end on the sides for renewing the water source block, there's also one built into the frame. That way, if this one on the end fires, there's a water source block in there and a water source block here, and it refills that water source block. The reason why you need this is because the front column is all flowing water. It flows forward, hits the chain, and flows down. So anything, even if it just fires, pops up, and lands back on the water, that back row will flow forward once it reaches the top piece of water. It'll flow forward into this one, which will then push it forward into the chain layer and then drop down. You could do chains horizontally. They'd be a lot easier to place than this way, but you would have the ability for some of your kelp to land on the chains and then they wouldn't fall to the bottom. So I did them vertically in order to block the water and not impede the kelp at all. Because even if it comes to the edge of the water and then from the water runs into the chain, there's still room between the chain and the water block for it to fall down to the bottom. So this is a completely lossless system. This is not a completely lossless system. I am curious about this, and so I'm actually going to take a look at it and see if I can. Give me that. There we go. Okay, so yeah, if another one grows, then it will push them off the edge. As long as they don't pop sideways and land on the block here, if they land on one of those and one on either side of that piece grows, then it will push it forward. One up in here somewhere, and then I think one down here, both sat there for so long that they despawned. So good to know how productive it is for in case I want to build something like this in my survival world. But I'm also going to take a moment, get myself prepared, and show you how this works because I believe Impulse's is 3 tall and mine is only 2 tall, because I think he runs his observer back into a note block, and then he comes out the top of the note block to observe that, and then he comes forward to the piston. I think that's how he does it, but I don't know. And this is a design that I've seen people use since a few years ago. I took a hiatus from Minecraft, and so I don't know exactly how old this design is, but is pretty common and it's really easy. The thing that makes it updated is what Impulse showed in his video, where instead of just running the redstone along the back and firing as many pistons as possible, you instead run it into target blocks, and the target blocks fire the pistons, because they changed how that works in 1.16. So I will get ready and I will show you how to build slices of this. Okay, so while each individual slice runs here, I did make this 8 wide just to demonstrate the way that it works. Is you have your source block, which then runs 7 more spaces. The way that I tied everything together, normally you wouldn't need to have this wall in between a section of slices. You could just build it here and then do this with the water to make it continue. But since I'm just adding this on, I separated it with the wall, and that dirt is holding in the water source block that's currently in the wall. Otherwise, it would just be one constant thing until you actually needed that block on the end. So the way that this works, and I will probably, yeah, I'll do it over here. The reason why this is lower than that one is because I originally had a different design for the water channel at the bottom, and it required a 3rd level, and then I figured out a more efficient way to do it. So this one is actually the height that it would be. You need your water channel, you need a barrier in front of it, whether it's glass or something solid like stone. At the end of it, you need ice, and you need one of these slabs at the top. That way you can place water on top of it, because otherwise, right here, this column, if it pushes the kelp forward and you don't have this installed, it'll just land on the ice and it'll sit there, and then anything that comes forward until that stack fills up will just get sucked into the stack sitting on the ice. So you need to have this top slab with water on top of it in order to get things that fall down this column to move over here and continue on the water channel. So that's what you do with the one between. But the way that this works is you have your dirt and your stone there. This is the row you're going to put your kelp on. So you need to do an observer facing the kelp, a solid block that can be redstone powered behind that, a note block. Then you observe the top of the note block, observe the observer, put a piston in there, and then cover up the top of it so that it doesn't push up, it pushes forward. Now I am going to just temporarily fill these in because the water is going to flow, and can't place anything there because I don't have water. I do have water in my inventory. So this also is where your source block on the end will go, right next to the piston. So you need something holding it in. You need source block there. You need a source block there, and a source block there. This one doesn't have to be a source block. The kelp will grow and make it one, but you want source blocks on both sides of it so that it refills. And then just so that this is more consistent, this way, these are all source blocks in this column, but because these are flowing, they pull forward this way. So put the kelp there, which fires the piston, and then if it grows, it fires the piston again, which pushes it forward. And then this water should pull it forward. If you just put a note block straight behind the observer and then try to pull that signal in, the problem is that this note block being right behind the observer becomes powered and then powers any note block next to it as well. So you fired 3 of them at once, which destroys a 3 wide section of source blocks and they can never refill again. Then your kelp just falls into this column and sinks to the bottom and it never flows forward. So you need to have them going back away from the observer so that this block is powered and it only powers this one note block behind it so that it only destroys one source block so that it doesn't destroy the ability for the system to work. I think it is a water source block in the front because that way the one up top is still flowing forward, and if it's a water source block in the front and it stops there, then it will float up until it hits the moving water, and then when it hits the moving water, it pushes it forward. And of course, now it's not stopping on the chain to test. Okay, like right there, it didn't go far enough forward, but then it floated to the top, hit the moving water, and went forward. So that's what it is. I never actually placed source blocks in the front here, but what happened was, like over here, I accidentally placed one of these down, and because everything behind it is source blocks, then this one became a source block. And because this was a source block and that was a source block, it made this a source block, which made that a source block and that a source block all the way down the chain. So the bottom layer became source blocks. But because there's no kelp in this layer, there is no way to create source blocks in the top row. And so it continues to slide any of the kelp that lands in this column forward, hit the chains, and go off into the bottom. So you effectively, is it under this one? Let's just say for the sake of argument that we have source blocks and flowing water. You need to have source blocks like that, flowing water there, and then anything that grows up in here, even if it lands there, will float up into this one, slide forward into the air gap, and then shoot off down the water tunnel. Yeah, that's how it works. And then you just do the same thing for each one. You want another one, you put that stone, note block, observer, observe the observer, piston, kelp, and cover it up so it doesn't shoot in a funny direction. And now there's 2 of them. And the benefit of this system, the reason why I think Impulses is 3 tall is because in this layer, he had a bunch of zombies and creepers and skeletons spawning, and this is only one layer between the slices. So this design cannot have them spawning here. And to my understanding, mobs cannot spawn on redstone components, which is what these are. But I don't know if that's that specifically or if it's redstone dust, observers, things that are in the airspace of the block on top of this. I've only heard that they can't spawn on top of redstone components. So be interested to know the answer to that because this may not be spawn proof on top and you may be able to spawn spiders if they spawn on this row. But otherwise, easy system to create. And the note blocks, if they have a solid block above them, like the observer, don't make any sound when they're hit. I personally like redstone lamps more than observer, or more than note blocks, but note blocks are cheaper. A lamp is a glowstone and 4 redstone dust, whereas the note blocks are 1 redstone dust and a bunch of planks. See that right there? But that wouldn't normally be a problem if I didn't change the height of this. If I didn't change the height of this, that water block would be flowing straight into the top here, just like it does there. It wouldn't be a problem, but I changed the height of this because this is the actual dimensions that you would need in order for it to work. And you notice here at the end, just in case I wanted to add on to it, I already put in the ice block and the slab, which prevents anything from coming this way, because this source block can only travel that way, so it already has momentum pulling items that fall into the source block towards the flowing water. Nothing in here can go that way. But when it gets to the end of the flowing water, it pushes it onto the ice underneath the slab, which then slides forward into this one, which pulls it forward. And that's how the water trail works. And I suppose I should actually fill these. There. Oop. That one doesn't have water. There we go. So if you're interested in a kelp farm, this works. If you wanted to do something with bamboo or sugarcane, this style of detection would work, but you would not want to have it built the same way as this. I'll show you an alternative for kelp and bamboo if there's enough time in this video. If not, then I'll make a separate video, or not kelp, for sugarcane and bamboo. I will make a separate video for sugarcane and bamboo if there isn't enough time once this one is time-lapsed and this part is cleaned up and assembled and all that. If you like what you see, if this inspires you in any way for a kelp farm, pumpkin melon farm, bone meal farm, then like, comment, subscribe. Hope this helps, and see you in the next episode.